While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Reaching out to the 50 million Christ followers in America who are approaching or already in retirement, you've tuned into iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and I'm joined today by the founder of the Retirement Reformation, Bruinsma. Check us out online, please. retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. And on Facebook, Retirement Reformation. And of course, in the App Store, download our app, Retirement Reformation. You know, in his book, Moving Forward, Putting Your Future Funded Ministry into Action, Bruce Bruinsma continues to lead you towards a future that is fully funded and ministry-minded. In this book, Bruce unpackages and simplifies the key components to preparing for the future. Redefining what retirement could be, the first step, now it's time to learn how to move. Redefining what retirement could be in the first step, that was his first book, now it's time to learn how to move forward. Today, in the first of a three-part podcast series, we're going to be talking about the meaning of life and the three stages of the fourth quarter of life, the part we call retirement. Bruce Bruinsma, welcome back to iRetire4Him.
Jim, it's always good to be with you and our audience. We've been on quite a journey over the last number of years, and God continues to lead us and point us in directions that are going to make an impact.
Bruce, I want to jump right into this. We're talking about everything we're talking about today came right from your book, Moving Forward. And I want to make sure people know that they can get access to this resource right on our website, retirementreformation.org. But this is book 2 of a 4-book series. What was the first book called?
What was the first book called? I don't remember.
Well, you know, how about that I'll look that up right while we're talking about. For some reason, I drew a blank too. That's terrible. Okay. All right. That's terrible. I will figure that out.
I think it's right in the front, right on after the front cover or the first couple of pages is the names of the book.
All right, I'll make sure that I get that before we get into our next break. I apologize for that. I didn't mean to put John on the spot on that one. I shouldn't ask a question I don't really answer to. All right, what should be our top priority in life, Bruce? After knowing God and making Him number one, what is our life's purpose?
Our life's purpose is one that was designed by God, and that plan actually began before time began, according to the Bible, the way I read it. And then, in fact, of course, we're born with a DNA that comes from our parents. And then we go through life's experiences. And those life experiences all fit into that plan that God has for us. And as we listen to the power of the Holy Spirit, we find the places where we can have meaning and purpose and that we can be passionate about. And for each one of us, it's going to look a little bit different. However, the key is that we are all ministers together. And what that means is that we, representing Jesus Christ, that in fact we have an impact on the lives of others in the way that He has called each one of us uniquely to do.
Well, and you stated on, right at the beginning of Moving Forward that our top priority in life is just to know God. And really Jesus summarized the law and the prophets all in 2 sentences. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And our top priority in life, so many of us get distracted with priorities, don't we, Bruce?
Well, we either get distracted or we don't realize that there are priorities, and we just kind of live from moment to moment and day to day and respond to what comes, and that we're really not proactive, but we are either passive or reactive. And God calls us to be proactive.
I just think it's so easy to get distracted by the things of the world instead of having God be our top priority, our relationship with our Lord being the top priority. Bruce, in Moving Forward, and this is really where...
If I can just interrupt that
absolutely.
for a second and if I can interrupt that and make an observation, is that there's so many older people that I talk to, and that's lots, and we talk about the subject that we're conversing about here because it's so important. And virtually they all say to me, well, I am just so busy. I am just so busy. And it's busy with doctor's appointments and kids and, and this and that and the other thing, traveling, whatever. But in fact, what they don't say is that I'm on a path following what God calls me to do, and I'm just loving it.
And we need to change that. And that's what the Retirement Reformation is really all about, is helping people to understand how much God wants for their retirement. And it's not about just being busy. Because I hear it too. I live in Florida. I'm surrounded by retired people, and they're all like, I can't imagine having a job anymore. I'm so busy. You hear that all the time. Bruce, the crux of our conversation today is really about the 3 stages of retirement. You call retirement the 4th quarter of life, but there's 3 stages in it. What are those 3 stages of retirement?
Well, those 3 stages, and they have some general year or age boundaries. So that first stage, roughly from, let's say, age 65 or 66 or 67, up through, the latter parts of the 70s. So let's call it 78. And what I've observed there, and that's how the names of those stages came, is that people are generally very active. And so we call it active application. And so it's finding the meaning and purpose, or if you don't have meaning and purpose and you're trying to make leisure have value, whatever it is, you're very active doing it. You're perhaps working out, you're walking around the block with a dog, you're traveling, but it's very active application. And we would call each one of us to active application for that ministry purpose that we have. But there's energy, and active application is the first one. The second one, starting, say, roughly at that 78 and through the mid-80s, 85, 86, 87, again, perhaps in that 10-year period, is the opportunity to have what we call insightful stewardship. Another way of talking about that might be mentoring. And so the opportunity to take the principles that God has instilled and the experience that God has, and the wisdom that God has instilled in you, and be able to apply that in a relationship with someone else where you are a mentor or you are helping them to understand how those principles apply in their lives or the solution to problems. The third area we call meaningful reflection. And in there, it's the opportunity to be able to bring together all of what it is that you have learned and put that into a package that can be disseminated, whether it be in conversations or whatever it may be, the principles that will apply across life. So the first one is very individual. The second one is in relationship with someone else. And the third is the meaningful reflection that goes across life. I got just a couple of examples there. Number one, Billy Graham wrote one of his best books in his late 90s. Jimmy Carter, regardless of what you think about his politics, but has written a couple of really good books in his 90s. One about faith, which is just excellent. And so those are reflective of their life in applying God's principles to the world as they see it.
And what stage do you consider yourself in, Bruce?
I'm in that second one. I just, I'm going to be 81 here in a period of time. And so the opportunity to, in a sense, these podcasts are a mentoring opportunity, an opportunity to be able to share with our audience and really to have individual application in their lives. And so it excites me every time I not only do this, but all the other opportunities that God gives me to be able to be in that mentoring kind of relationship.
I don't know that I agree with you, because I think you're in the active application, because I don't know that I can keep up with you, because you're jet setting all over the country and all around the world and making an impact in the kingdom everywhere you go. And it's amazing. I love the fact that you are not sitting, you're not getting moldy. You're out there being crazy, and I love that. It's fantastic. All right. So, and I'm in that pre-retirement stage. I'm only 55. And so I'm still looking at, wow, how can I make sure that my retirement years are I keep praying. I said, Lord, just help me to be like Bruce, that I could run the race to its fullest till my very last breath. That's what I want to do. You're listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. We'd love for you to check us out online and check out the 3 books that Bruce has already written. The first one, Finding Freedom, Book 1 in the Future Funded Ministry series. Book 2, Moving Forward, which we're talking about today. Book 3, Charting Your Course, which we've talked about before. And then, Bruce, you've got a 4th one coming out. What's that one going to be called?
That one is going to be called Being Fruitful, and just filled with wonderful examples of people who have walked the retirement reformation path, walked the path of what it means to bring meaning and purpose. And I'm excited for that to be released, which will be within the next month.
Fantastic. We'll be right back with more on iRetire4Him. Hang on.
The Retirement Reformation wants to come alongside you as you navigate in each stage of your retirement. Our online resources include our blog, our downloadable books, and life planning studies, as well as membership and coaching options. Go to retirementreformation.org and use these resources to begin the transformation of your retirement. Journey from retirement to reformation, so you can say, I retire for Him. That's retirementreformation.org. Now, back to the show.
Hey, welcome back to iRetire4Him. As you know, during every second segment of iRetire4Him, we bring on somebody who's got a story to tell of how they're living out their faith in their retirement, and today is no different. Today we're bringing in Ron Henry from Marketplace Chaplains. Marketplace Chaplains is an organization I'm super passionate about. They've got a need for over 400 new chaplains needed in America right now, and we want to tell you, the iRetire4Him audience, all about Marketplace Chaplaincy. Ron Henry, welcome to iRetire4Him.
Oh, thank you very much, Jim. It's my pleasure to be here. You're hitting a passion point in my own journey here with this iRetire.
So iRetire4Him is the name of a book that I gave you in June when we first met. Ron, just an aside before we talk about Marketplace Chaplains, did you like that book?
Well, I'm in this journey, and so I own the journey of iRetire4Him. And I found the book to be really an excellent blueprint. For that person who's getting into their 60s, approaching retirement, and just don't know how do I go about finding purpose in my life. This book can give you a roadmap. It's very practical, which as a business person, I love practical books. I don't need to be up in the clouds. I know how do I execute this?
So speaking of that roadmap then, Ron Henry, you could be retired, sitting on the beach, playing golf, tennis, pickleball, whatever it may be. Why? Why become a chaplain?
Well, I think it sits down to more understanding. I was blessed about 25 years ago to meet a gentleman who taught me how to finish strong. And it was a gentleman, I'm not necessarily reference his name, but when I met him in the mid-90s, he was on the board of 22 major ministry organizations, to which many of those organizations wouldn't exist today without his participation. But you wouldn't know him. He was behind the scenes. And he wrote 52 books and everything. And all he spoke about is finishing strong. And he finished his 52nd book. He said, I want to finish my book at age 90. And then went home to the Lord. But his later years, he had immaculate degeneration. He had the Dictators in the last 3 books. He had a hip injury that he got playing basketball back in college. He had to live with all his years. So this made a big imprint in me. And then a combination of understanding that God has a purpose for my life. And my life is not over when I'm getting out of a full-time job.
Yeah, we like to say in iRetire4Him that when you retired, your calling didn't retire. That there's just a different stage in life.
So what happened to me is I approached the year. It's interesting. Sometimes you go through changes, then you look back and go, oh, now I realize why I did it. Well, I had an executive search firm that I downsized. And as I was downsizing and it's approaching my mid-60s, I was saying, well, God, you've given me all these great contacts. What can I do? How can I utilize those things and still have some flexibility? And all of a sudden, it's amazing when you put it out to God that way. I was approached by Jason Brown, the chief marketing officer at Marketplace, said, hey, can you help us with a little of the marketing? You know a few executives out there. And of course, 30 years of executive search, I knew a few people. So I came aboard to help expand the blueprint of an organization that's quite candidly, the big hag that turned me over was given by the CEO. at that time, and he said to me, Ron, I just want to share with us. And I said, my big BHAG is I want to make sure that every worker in America meets Jesus. And I thought, I can get my hands around that initiative. So, not through words, but through actions of care and love. So this has been a great opportunity for me to go out there and just give purpose to life. But I think, you can be a professionally trained chaplain with a big C, but I perceive in life we're all chaplains with a small c. So it just gives me purpose every day to get up thinking one more person to meet a person.
Right.
It's almost like the cliche, one more for Jesus, but it's one more to get God's love in their life and really help guide them through their life.
So do you ever get a chance to act as a chaplain, or you only get to recruit chaplains?
Well, actually, I act like a chaplain every time I reach out to a business owner. Because, many times the purpose of the meeting may revolve around chaplaincy for their company and their employees. But I could sit there for an hour, and I've had a occasion after 55 minutes, the business owner goes, aren't we supposed to talk about chaplains? Well, that's because I was a chaplain to that CEO.
Sure.
They needed someone they could trust that could understand the position and someone who would ask the question. So, the beauty of chaplaincy is it's all about, not about me, it's all about serving people and listening, asking questions, probing. And that's what a good chaplain does.
And the cool part is you get, as a marketplace chaplain, you actually get paid to do that stuff. You should do that for free. It's so amazing.
Well, be careful how you say that too loud. But actually, my wife actually said, you would be doing the same thing you're doing now, whether you got paid or not, wouldn't you? And I go, yeah. But I don't want to let the organization know.
But you don't mind getting a paycheck. All right. So when you talk to these CEOs and organization leaders, because it's not just businesses, it's organizations, nonprofit organizations often need a chaplain. Heck, a lot of church environments could use a chaplain or two. When you get them to see the need for a chaplain, what kind of impact are you seeing on the organization once they say yes to marketplace chaplains online at mchapusa.com? What kind of impact are you seeing?
Well, it's radical. It's radical changes. We are serving a major casino resort, which I may get the numbers incorrect, but we initially launched it with about 1,800 of their employees because of the COVID thing. Most of the 5,000 employees were on furlough. And we started serving them virtually. We didn't even have a chance to do our face-to-face. And our team there, which did a phenomenal job of chaplains, put together a report, some analytics. And when the report was presented to the chief operating officer, he actually got very emotional about it because he just didn't know how much people were hurting in his company, and just the impact, knowing that there's somebody out there that's actually peer-to-peer loving on people in my organization and helping them navigate life. So, just productivity is going up. We call it absenteeism was down.
Right.
So, but the issues we face today, literally every week we get a story of another person who our chaplain has spoken to, them or maybe a child who is dealing with suicidal thoughts. This is real stuff, Jim, and these people are being impacted. And, who was it? David Weekley at Weekly Homes made a quote just last week. He said he walked into his office and he saw the chaplain in his office. And as soon as he saw the chaplain in his office, he felt a sigh of relief that he was covering his people.
They're an amazing group. We got to interview David a couple of years back. All right, but it's not just the chaplains minister to the employees. They also get to minister to the families of the employees. And we heard a story when we had the Marketplace Chaplains guys on for I Work for Him. They told us a story of how they actually are ministering to sometimes customers who have a need. What an amazing opportunity. Ron, you're retired age. Would you do it all over again? Would maybe you do it sooner next time? If you had a chance, if you had known about Marketplace Chaplains 20 years ago, would you have done it sooner?
No. The answer is because my heart was still serving as a chaplain, but it wasn't in a formalized role. Because my work that I was doing in executive search, dealing with company owners, really, as I look back at it, was very much similar to a chaplain. I just didn't identify it at that time. So, chaplaincy is a heart issue. And it's really a desire to really, do you care for people, care for their well-being, you care to make a difference in their life, you care to reflect Christ to them in a manner that's, unconditional, non-judgmental, confidential, integral relationships. So as I look back in my life, since I got saved, in many respects, I've been a chaplain, bringing that light into the marketplace. So now I have a formalized check-in, and now I'm having a ball doing it because I don't have to worry about payroll on Friday.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what I love about the fact is that there's an opportunity for our listeners to get plugged in, and you can go to Marketplace Chaplain's website, mchapusa.com, find out about the opportunities they've got, get in touch and be able to talk with guys like Ron Henry who will tell you their story, and you can figure out whether chaplaincy is right for you.
And the key on it, Jim, just to mention, remember this, all of our chaplains are what you would call part-time. So you have the flexibility of working 3 or 4 hours a week, 10 to 15 hours a week. So you have control of your life. So it's not a 40-hour-a-week type of role.
Right.
So that's a key for people, to me, in the iRetirement age of life, because you want to have that flexibility. You want to be able to spend time with your grandkids.
That's
and maybe sit on the beach, maybe play a round of golf,
That's right. For more on Marketplace Chaplains, check them out online, mchapusa.com. You're listening to I Retire for Him with your host, Jim Brangenberg and Bruce Bruinsma, and we'll be right back in just a second. Every I Retire for Him show goes so quickly, we don't often get to remind you that there are 2 resources you should be checking out right now. I recommend that you get a copy of the Retirement Reformation book and the I Retire for Him book. Retirement Reformation focuses on the mindset and behavioral changes needed, let's just say paradigm shifting, that is needed to live out your faith in retirement. I Retire for Him is focused on many of the ways you can put your faith into action by investing your life into others in your retirement years. Get both at the Retirement Reformation website in the bookstore, retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org. Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him. As Bruce and I are talking today about his book, Moving Forward, putting your future funded ministry into action. Moving Forward, putting your future funded ministry into action. You can get a copy of this book online at retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. Bruce, I want to go into detail on each one of these stages, because you've got friends that are in all different parts of these stages. We've got, as you said before, we got active application, we've got insightful stewardship and reflective sharing, and you already gave a little summary on these, but I want to dig in here. And so we're talking about the 4th quarter of life, our retirement years, and you break it up into 3 stages. Active application. Well, there's some questions that people ask themselves in there, like, what do I do with my time? I mean, because you've said it so many times before. Let's describe the active application years, because you say so many people know what they're retiring from, but they don't know what they're retiring to.
Well, as we've often talked, the tension that develops at these points of transition in our lives and the decisions that we make are very, really critical. And so when you're making that career transition from career to quote unquote retirement, to that period of time, or what I like to call a future funded ministry time. And so initially I just need to get refreshed. I just need to have some space. I just need to have some time and move from. But again, there's that huge void of what are we moving to? And so during that period of time, the early stages of that are that discovery phase of that. Discovering what it is that God would have me do next, and stepping into the opportunities that He puts in front of us. Those opportunities can start small, but may grow big. But in fact, the name of the book, Moving Forward, the key is that you're taking a step forward and you're not just simply resting in place.
How much of that work, the prepping for stage 1, how much of that work can be done in their 50s, long before they retire? Can we start preparing for moving forward before we even get there?
Absolutely, we can. Matter of fact, the preparation moving forward. Just think of a camping trip, and you're going to go to Yosemite, and in fact, you get in the car and you start driving, and then you realize that you didn't bring a map, and you didn't bring a tent, and you hadn't called ahead to have a place to stay, and you don't know where you're not prepared. Well, can you go to Yosemite in that fashion and kind of try and fake it? Yeah, you probably can.
Yeah, and you die.
But is that a wise thing to do? Absolutely not. So preparation, and if we have, when we are prepared to do something, it means not only are we mentally prepared for it and spiritually prepared, but we're physically prepared. And so you can go, there are stages prior to the 3 we're talking about, and you can go through those in preparation for each one of those stages, and we can talk about that at some other time. But I think the things that you put in place in your 50s and perhaps early 60s, and the more you can do that, the more you can plan, the better that transition is going to be, and the easier it's going to be, and you'll be able to focus your energy on the things that bring meaning and purpose and joy and freedom to you. So that was a long answer to a short question, but can you begin preparation years in advance? Not only can you, but I would urge you to do that, because it will just simply make it better.
Well, and you dedicate a lot of the book moving forward to financially preparing, really getting your financial house in order. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but that's a big key, important. I mean, if you want money to not be a distraction, the least that you can do is make sure that you're out of debt by the time you enter into retirement. The best that you could do is to actually prepare for your monthly finances, make sure that you can live within your means so that you don't have money issues during your active application, during your whole retirement years. I mean, there's a lot of prep that can be done, both mentally and physically and financially.
Actually, one of the things that I often say is that, in the preparation and during retirement, money is the least important issue unless you don't have any.
Right.
And so when you do have any and you are prepared, you can kind of then set that aside and focus on all the other issues that are there. If you haven't, then in fact, you end up focusing on that, and everything else either gets short shrift, set aside, ignored, or becomes a problem.
Well, and some of our friends who are retired do need to go back to work because they weren't able to save enough during retirement, or it's money they need for just paying their Medicare supplement.
Jim, I'm going to interrupt you there because there's kind of a new insight that you and I haven't even talked about that I think is emerging as a result of COVID. And I think there's a whole cadre of people that would like to go back to work, not because they don't have enough money, not because they don't need to, but I think there's a whole series of other reasons. And maybe we need to do a show on that. But I'm in the process of really exploring that deeply, of the number of people that really miss that work environment, miss that community, and would like to go back to work and don't know how to do it.
Well, Bruce, on our next series, we're going to be tearing open the pages of iRetire4Him, the book that Martha and I wrote with her dad. And that really addresses a lot of that. Okay, if you're going to go back to work, if you're going to find purpose in your days and it needs to involve or wants to involve getting back in a job, how to choose that job wisely, how to approach that so that you can be the biggest and best influence possible in there. So I think that series is coming up. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Talk about stage 2, insightful stewardship. Describe some activities that would describe insightful stewardship. Give me some examples of some of your friends that are doing that.
Well, last Friday morning, I went to a restaurant in Colorado Springs, and there were 4 men, probably about 30 years, each one of them about 30 years younger than I was, and they meet for breakfast every Friday. And so occasionally I'm able to go and sit with them, and we have just the best kinds of conversations because they ask me questions about their family or about some issue that they're engaged with or something that they're interested in. And so I have the opportunity to be able to share. Matter of fact, when I sat down last Friday, one of them, George, said to me, he said, "So what wisdom do you have for us today?" What a beautiful entree. And then at the table, just kind of across the aisle from me, was a good friend of mine who was meeting with one of the pastors of our church. And they were in deep conversation. And so after we kind of finished breakfast with the 4 that I had, I went over and sat with them. And I said, "So what's going on here?" He says, "Oh, we meet every Friday morning. And we don't talk about church. We don't talk about politics. We talk about our lives." And so the mentoring that was taking place there. So there's just 2 real life examples from from last Friday.
What about stage 3, reflective sharing? When we start to slow down and maybe we can't drive anymore. Maybe we can't drive every day, or maybe we're not as mobile as we'd like to be. What does reflective sharing look like? Give me some examples there.
One of the things that I'd like to urge our listeners to continue, and you can find some of those resources on our website, but to be able to write down your family and your history and be able to share that with your children. Some of them have wished that you would tell stories about your childhood, and for whatever reason, you've chosen not to do that. So it's opening yourself up to the experiences that God has given you and finding ways to be able to share that with your family, with your community, and if God leads you to on a wider stage. Matter of fact, one of the people that we're going to interview at a point in time here, Jerry White, is just a wonderful example of doing that and being able to not only reflect, but then to share the reflections and the principles that come out of it.
Yeah, what I've seen is that in the last 20 years, there's a lot of different resources that chronologically superior people can take advantage of, like the Retirement Reformation, in order to help capture that story, to write it down. And of course, with an iPhone, you can just dictate it right to your iPhone and send it out as a voice memo. I mean, it's super easy. Anybody that's in stage 4 of life should have an iPhone, because it makes life so much easier. So, Bruce, as we close out today's podcast, I want to ask one last question. Can we really make vital contributions to the kingdom and its expansion during each of these 3 stages of our 4th quarter of life?
When I speak to audiences and I ask them, does God have a plan for your life? And everybody generally raises their hand. And then I ask the reflective question, how do I know that God has a plan for your life? And here's the answer. You're still here.
Amen.
If you are not, that plan now has an eternal application. If you are here, there is an opportunity to be able to impact the lives of others, regardless of which one of those stages that you're in. And hopefully that's an ongoing practice from the stages that began prior to this also.
Yeah, we've interviewed Martha's dad several times on our podcast. Ted Haynes is his name. And recently he was in the hospital he had COVID and ended up then having some other issues, was in the hospital. And he's been a Pocket Testament League guy forever and ever and ever. And he just turned 89. He was in the hospital and he wasn't having a good day. He was in the hospital, obviously, but he brought 20 Pocket Testaments of John with him. And at the end of his first day in the hospital, he calls Martha and says, I need you to bring me more. I ran out. God keeps bringing me new people to my room that are taking care of me. Give me some more Bibles. He's on his bed with tubes plugged into his arms, and he's wrapped up, and he's not feeling good, and he's telling people about Jesus. So we can do it even if we're not feeling good. That's just a great example of that.
Jim, just in one word two words, is being intentional.
Right.
And in each stage of life, if we are intentional, whether it be Ted, whether it be my friend Pam, and all the other people that in fact have found ways to have meaning and purpose in that last stage and in the prior 2, for sure.
We're talking about the book Moving Forward, putting your future-funded ministry into action. We want to make sure putting a future-funded ministry into motion, get a copy of this online. retirementreformation.org. You can get the first book, Finding Freedom, the 3rd book, Charting Your Course, and the 4th book, Bruce says, coming out within a couple of months. Moving forward, then you can really identify how do you put your plan into action. Bruce Bruinsma, great conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, with your host, Jim Brangenberg, and of course, Bruce Bruinsma. We're Christ followers journeying from retirement to reformation, so we can ultimately say, I retire for him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.